Hello, animation fans, and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. I'm your host, Larry Vasquez, and you're listening to episode 57. In this episode, we have Brendan Boddy, who has been in the animation field for quite some time and has had the opportunity to work both in animated feature as well as visual effects. Some of his film credits include 4 of the Harry Potter films, Hellboy 2, John Carter, and one of my favorites, Legends of the Guardians. He's worked on Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs 2, The Amazing Spider-Man, and recently Pacific Rim and The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies. He has had quite the career here, and so I'm really looking forward to speaking with him. He's very well known for his skills in flying creatures. Obviously, when he worked on The Legends of the Guardians, Owls of Gaul, and he will be teaching our Workshop 3 Creatures class, which is Flight School and Fantasy Creatures. So I was really looking forward to speaking with him about his career, what he's looking forward to teaching here, and I guess, the anatomy of flight. So buckle up, get your headsets on, and let's listen to this podcast. Again, I just, first of all, really just appreciate your time. I always thank my guests. I know you guys have lives and a schedule. I was just recently listening to some podcasts from some of our past podcasts, and just the nuggets in those podcasts, they're lifelong lessons. And so I appreciate you taking the time, because these things will go much further than just our present audience, and to be able to even listen to again with, little nuggets of wisdom there. So I appreciate you taking the time to share with us.
Oh, not at all. It's it's a real honor to do this. I think, I look through your list of who's done podcasts before and where they've worked and who they've worked for, and I think, I feel very lucky to be even kind of in amongst that group. So,
oh, very cool, very cool. Well, looking at your IMDb, you fit right in, no problem. You've worked on some amazing movies, and so I'm really looking forward to jumping into those and talking about that. First off, I always like kind of hearing how, we're all congregated in this amazing industry, but it's always neat to hear how people have worked their way through, and, where they were educated and how you came to be an animator. So if you want to kind of dive back into how you became an animator, or how you got training, what made you want to do it? Was there any particular movie that kind of stood out? A lot of people's is Toy Story or Jurassic Park or something along that lines. Was there anyone for you that kind of clicked where you going, hey, I just want to do this?
Yeah, I think, I kind of had a weird kind of progression through animation, where I think the thing that really grabbed my attention when I was a really young kid was the stop motion animation and Wallace and Gromit, which I'm assuming you get in America. But
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. But that was, those are just, I just love those. And that's kind of where I wanted to do. I wanted to do stop motion animation. And then I looked at sort of the colleges in Scotland that did animation as a course. And I came in Dundee, which is kind of one of the better ones. And then through my time in studying the course, I kind of switched. I started off doing stop motion, but then stop motion is so frustrating. It's so hard to do well. And you'll be trying to get your puppet, in a nice pose or doing something, and it'll just fall over. And then you try and get it back into the right position, and it's really hard.
Very challenging, huh?
Very challenging. I don't know how they do it. I started doing drawn traditional animation at the same time.
Okay.
And I suddenly realized, you can have more control with that. You can actually, I figured out, I had the Eric Goldberg notes, which were he's done a book since, but at that time it was the original Xeroxed kind of notes that had been handed around, were really faded. And it was like this thing that I had to try and figure out. And from that point on, I did 2D animation mostly at college. And then a little bit of 3D as I...
Uh-oh.
The instruction
Hang on, you cut out there. You said you did a little 3D.
All right. Your internet connection is unstable. That's not good. Yeah, I did a little bit of 3D in the college, but not a huge amount. But yeah, when I graduated, there wasn't a lot of 2D jobs around, and to be honest, I wasn't quite good enough. My drawing wasn't quite up there with where it needs to be for that. So yeah, I had my little VHS tape, and I took that around all the 2D studios. And by chance, someone from Framestore had come up to our college, and I had a card from Framestore. So I phoned this guy from Framestore called Michael Eames, and he gave me an interview. And I turned out, by just luck, just by timing, how they, at that time, I think there was a big expansion of 3D animation, and there just wasn't enough people to fill that void. So they were just like, okay, well, you seem to have an enthusiasm for animation, so we'll employ you and we'll just sort of train you up. So, yeah, I was very lucky just in my timing and where I was that I got into Framestore as my first job.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So again, they could probably see some of your skill set in your 2D, but again, that enthusiasm, positive attitude, they knew they could run with you and train you in that.
I guess so. Yeah. Looking back, the work was not great, but yeah, and I think
the only reason I bring that up is because that's one of the interesting things in our industry too, is that we're very collaborative, and so that idea that having to have a personality that is enthusiastic, that is willing to work with others, I think is extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of people employing, that's what they look for more than anything, I guess, is that if you're on your reel, if you're doing your own personal tests and you seem to be just, that enthusiasm comes through, and that's because it's a lot of work, so you need to have that kind of that work ethic to want to do it, I guess. Right.
So what was your first gig there at Framestore?
I was working on a mini series called Dinotopia.
Okay.
Yeah, which wasn't the best piece of work ever, but yeah, it was like 3 1-hour episodes, and so it took 2 years to do, and it was just fantastic for me because it was just like, that was my training basically there. I mean, the first 6 months, I really wasn't producing very much for them. They would give me here's a dinosaur tail. I've done the walk. You could just do the tail sort of thing, and bits and pieces to kind of learn on. And then, but by the end of the 2 years, I wouldn't say I was a good animator, but I'd certainly getting sort of reasonably competent, hopefully. And then, yeah, so that was a really great experience. And yeah, just the people where I was working with, it was an interesting time, I guess. I was thinking about this the other day, in that was, as I'd kind of done some 2D before, but the people around me and the senior animators and the supervisors, they were all usually from 2D as a background, from drawing animation. So yeah, it was really, the way that they were teaching kind of made sense to me. They would talk about posing and kind of, I remember there was this great lecture they showed me by Phil Niblink about the bouncing ball and how you can apply the bouncing ball basically to everything, and it was a real kind of great way to show how those 2D principles can be applied to 3D, and I think that's kind of stuck with me. That's kind of how I teach animation now. Is kind of using those 2D principles and making sure they're kind of the core of your 3D work.
Right. So did you find learning 3D difficult, or was it fairly straightforward for you since you had people who were able to kind of, so to speak, translate for you?
I did struggle, I think. I think it was just so I remember just thinking it was so complicated. I could get my head around 2D, but then I remember just trying to animate kind of like a stegosaurus sort of turning around. I'm trying to just get my head around that idea. I've got to rotate it. How do I manage that rotation? Like the Y rotation. I'm throwing my arms around here, but you can't see that. But it's like how do you manage that rotation round with his legs moving and the weight shifting and it was all that stuff. Yeah. So I did find it hard. It's always hard, I think.
Was it a gradual click for you, or did it something suddenly click where you kind of just felt like, okay, I'm getting into, I get this now, or as far as the transition is concerned?
Yeah, a gradual thing. There are, yeah, you do get these little jumps, I guess, as you work. You find little tricks, you find little techniques, you kind of figure things out, and so step by step, your work gets better and better. I suppose it's yeah.
It's funny that you started out in creatures, and here you are going to be teaching our one of our creature workshops.
That's and I did a bird. That was the first time I animated a bird as well. Was on Dinotopia. There was a little sort of parrot character called the messenger bird, and so I did quite a lot of work with that, and that's kind of sowed the seed of kind of bird flight, which I seem to have kind of by I don't know, by luck or coincidence, seemed to ended up doing quite a lot of bird flight through my career, but it started with the messenger bird in Dinotopia.
Nice. Because, yeah, for those who are listening, Brendan will be teaching our flight school in feature or fantasy creatures. And you had a nice little shout out here from Kevin Shorey, who said, you will do an amazing job with this class. Your flight stuff for anim is the best out there on the interwebs, which I think is a huge compliment coming from him working on How to Train Your Dragons over there at DreamWorks. So, yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's really nice. I don't know what to say to that.
Well, I know you got to work on a very one of my favorite movies, which was Legends of the Guardians, The Owls of Gaul.
All right, you like that one?
Oh, loved that one. Loved it. Yeah, it was one of those ones I didn't know what when I watched it back in the day. I didn't know what to expect. I just kind of got on a kick on Family Friday movie night type deal, and so we were just kind of renting movies and stuff, and I had to come across this one. I thought, okay, cool, and just was kind of blown away at how surprised how much I liked it. So yeah, that was a really fun one. I work with my brother here at our studio, and I mentioned I was going to be doing a podcast with you, and I mentioned this one here. And he's like, "Oh, cool," So yeah, that's it seems to be kind of a anim fan favorite.
Yeah, it's a bit of the story of how that film was made is a slightly turbulent one where Zack Snyder is the director, and he directed things like 300, and so they basically gave this. It's a book originally, so they gave him these books to sort of translate into a film, and then he'd kind of developed it to a point, and they had kind of gone through the story reel process and thought, okay, right, this is ready to go into production, and so that's when I came on board and a load of other animators. But then they showed it, I think at the same time they showed it to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers suddenly went, whoa, this is really dark and really violent. Which you'd expect from Zack Snyder, but they seem to be surprised. And so it had to go through a lot of sort of rewrites from that process and trying to soften the violence a little bit, but it's still got some dark moments in it.
For sure. For sure. It kind of reminded me, obviously a direct correlation, but reminding me of like Secret of Nim back in the day. It was this movie that had a great story, but much more darker, I guess, in tone or compared to some of the other movies. So it was one of those ones that was, I guess, a little bit more serious for what would be considered more of a kids genre or appealing to kids, I guess I would say, being obviously animation. So it was one of those ones that it kind of reminded me of something like The Secret of Nim, where you're kind of just taken back by surprise on how sophisticated and a little bit more serious in tone the movie was, I guess. And so that's why I think I just liked it in that regards.
Well, that's an amazing, comparison. But yeah, I'm interested to know what would happen if we'd made Zack Snyder's original film. I think it would have been really good, but I'm not sure who the audience was.
It'd been more PG-13.
It would have, at least it was, yeah. I think, the main thing was like there's this big moment in the middle of it where Soren's family died, and he comes back to his home. Soren's the main character, the main owl. He comes back to his home, and his parents are dead. It's like the Star Wars scene where the house is burnt down, and everyone starts crying, and it's just like yeah, it was an amazing scene, but maybe wouldn't. Yeah, it's not something you want the kids to think about too much. Perhaps.
Yeah, you definitely have to make sure it's some of the older kids for sure. But yeah, just I guess in that it was just a bit different, I guess, in regards to what else was out there at the time, which is fun. It's nice to have some of that variety out there, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Animal Logic, they do seem to want to set themselves apart a little bit from other animated features, and they've gone on to do the Lego films as well, where they're kind of got this, I guess, edging more towards realism, I guess. So, so that's kind of what they wanted to do was have an animated feature, but the owls basically look kind of realistic, and that was quite an interesting sort of animation challenge. Going, okay, so where is the line? We don't want to do full realistic owls, but we probably with these designs we can't go cartoony, you know, DreamWorks-esque kind of animation. So that was, I guess, that was. The good thing about the film being delayed in the rewrites gave us this huge pre-production time where we had the opportunity to kind of figure these things out, and kind of, I think, I think the film maybe has some flaws, but I'm really, I really do think the animation is good in it, and I think that time made that we were able to kind of figure these things out a little bit. Like I kind of, I guess, took on the bird flight as something that I was kind of trying to sort of design for the rest of the team in a way, I guess. But other people are doing the same sort of thing with the acting and kind of the owl movement and things like that. And the scale as well. We wanted the owls not to feel like small. They had to feel kind of like human size. So you have to kind of, you know, play with the timing to see what's going to feel right for to get the right weight into things as well.
Interesting. Okay. So what were some of the for lack of a better term, compromises that you guys did in animation that took off some of the edge of ultra realism, but still kept it where it felt like this is a semi-realistic bird? What were some of the compromises or things that you had to adapt, I guess, as you mentioned, during that pre-production time? Examples?
Think of examples. Well, and I'll speak for the bird flight because that's kind of what I know best, I guess. And so they're barn owls. So if you've ever seen a barn owl fly, they're not really the most graceful creatures. They kind of look like big moths. You know, you'll see them at night sometimes, and they kind of like, kind of like moth-like kind of flight. So to get the scale, to get them to feel bigger, we slowed the flight down, and then instead of looking at owls, but also trying to feed in things like eagles and sort of and the evil kind of the bad owls as well. You're looking at things like frigate birds and stuff like that to try and get kind of some push the silhouettes and push the kind of posing. So there is some sense of character in there. You can kind of get that from nature sometimes, I guess. That if you look at a frigate bird, which I'm sure most people aren't familiar with, but they kind of have these wings, and the body kind of hangs down low under the wings, and they kind of have this kind of menacing kind of look to them. So you can go, okay, so we can put that onto an owl and give that kind of feel to an owl. And so I guess most of the references were still natural, but you're trying to pull from different things to try and get the character in there, but without making it cartoony or.
Gotcha. No, that's very interesting. That's very cool. So they will be familiar with that bird if they take your class here. So
Day one, first class. This is a frigate bird.
How much did you guys? I mean, were you inundated with bird reference where you're like, okay, I'm sick of it, or was it just one of those things that was just completely fascinating where you couldn't get enough of it to accomplish what you were trying to do here?
There was a lot of it. I guess, I think we just had this folder system where you'd start to try and filter it all down into kind of, nice landings, or oh, this is an interesting bit of turning in flight. So you kind of had to sort all the reference out. But yeah, so we had all this stuff from TV, and we kind of scoured the internet. And then they'd also gone to sort of bird
sanctuaries. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so they shot a lot of footage of birds flying around, and all at kind of 50 frames per second, so you could really kind of see the detail in that. And yeah, it's just like I say, it was a long pre-production, so we had the time to really go through stuff and try and sort it out, and try and sharing it around as well, going, look, oh, you're doing a landing, look at this is a really interesting way to do a landing, and whatever it is.
Yeah, very cool. As I started looking at this class and you as an instructor teaching this course, what are some of the important parts or reasons why someone would need to take this class? The first thing that kind of comes to mind as an animator is you're in a different world, so to speak, in the air. So a lot of the things you may typically learn would seem like you'd kind of have to bypass, weight would be different and things of that nature. So is that some of the stuff that you found to be challenging to learning, and also some of the stuff that you're looking forward to teaching?
Yeah, I think I'd say one of the keys to getting bird flight looking good is the anatomy of the bird. I think what most people do is they start with the bird rig, and they want to do like the first pose, like pull the wings up. They'll just grab like the first 3 joints in an arm and then just sort of rotate them up, and you'll get this nice curved kind of up pose on the wing. But from the start, you've kind of broken the anatomy, because you've got basically the humerus, the ulnar and radius, and then the sort of the hand there as well. And so that second joint can't bend up. And then the hand joint doesn't really bend up either. So right from the start, you've kind of broken the rig. And then it's that thing that if you're not bending the bones in the correct way, then it's never going to look right.
Right. Yep.
A lot of animated flight tends to have overly floppy wings, and they'd have a softness in them in the feathers, but you need to get those underlying rigidity of the bones, and it's that kind of combination that makes it look good, I think.
Very cool.
But when you get into like the dynamics of flight and air, how the air moves over the wing and stuff like that, that gets really complicated. And I don't claim to really understand it that well. You can kind of figure out some things, but yeah, you do that thing in kind of class sometimes where you have a shape where it's flat on the top and then curved above, and you see the little arrows. I've seen those diagrams of the air traveling over the wing, and that gives it lift. But it's so much more complicated than that. If you stick your hand out of a window in a car and tilt your hand up and down, like you turn your palm towards the direction you're moving, and then turn it away so it's the back of your hand facing forward, you get to feel what the air is doing. And it's when your hand turns towards the air, that's when you feel the lift. But that is like the bird lifting its wings up. So it's kind of a lot of these counterintuitive things of you think the bird's pushing the air down, and then it's just trying to lift its wings up, but actually big birds are generating lift by twisting their wings during that upstroke. And that's awesome in the class, but there's lots of complicated kind of dynamics. If you don't have with
an understanding of that, it's not going to look right.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. And that's one of the things I love about animation. You do have to know that kind of stuff to get it to look right, because even the audience who doesn't understand all that stuff, they're used to seeing a bird fly. They're used to seeing people walk. They're used to seeing dogs walking. And so they may not know all the body mechanics and the physics behind it, but they'll notice something's off. And so that's what I love about what you're talking about here, because someone can be like, well, that seems maybe more complicated. And you're like, no, if you don't get that right, you won't sell it to the audience.
Yeah. And there's a thing in animation, I think, sometimes where you're working on, like, in your scene and you're looking at just a gray play blast, and the animation can look good, but then it's like once you see the render, like if you're working on visual effects and you're putting it into a backplate, and then there's a switch that happens there where your brain's like, all right, now my brain is asking me if this is real.
Okay.
And it looked like a nice piece of animation as a play blast, but there's something like now my brain's saying, no, that doesn't look, it's not right. It's a nice piece of animation, but it's not, correct for the creature, or the whatever it is, usually the flight. It's like, it doesn't quite, you can just sense it. Yeah.
Now you mentioned something about Big Birds, not Big Bird from Sesame Street, but Big Birds. Is there a large difference in how, or a significant difference, I'll say, in how the animation for smaller birds and bigger birds varies?
Yeah. I mean, there's it's a lot of way to answer this question. Basically, you've got hummingbirds, and they're almost like a separate thing. The way they fly is kind of different to other birds. But so if you take out hummingbirds, basically all other birds are more or less doing the same thing with their wings.
Okay.
They're all got the same structure. But yeah, with smaller birds, air resistance is a kind of interesting force in that it affects smaller things more than bigger things. So so the way smaller birds fly is different to bigger birds. Like that thing I was talking about where the wings, the big birds use their wings on the upstroke to give them lift. Little birds can't really do that because their wings it's like a payoff where they actually create too much drag for them to do that. So they'll tuck their wings in more as they're pulling the wings up, and not using them for lift.
Okay.
And then they start to have this flight pattern, which is different to big birds, where they do lots of little flaps and then just pull their wings in for a bit. And that's more efficient for them than having the wings out all the time, which have these drags. So,
no, that's fascinating.
So yeah.
Okay. No, that's why I guess I was asking, because again, I'm looking at this class and I'm just going, man, there's so much to it.
Yeah.
That's why we get guys like you who have done tons and tons and tons of animation and research to teach that. So no, that's fantastic. Very cool. Now, were there any other, looking at your, like I said, your IMDb, you've worked both in feature and VFX. I noticed here a lot of the Harry Potter films, The Hobbit, where there are a lot of creature or flying creatures in those films that you worked on. Did the messenger bird was the first thing in Dinotopia. Then straight after that was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and that was Fawkes the Phoenix. Okay.
So the end sequence there where it attacks the basilisk, that we as a team we did that, and so I animated some shots of Fawkes flying there, and then I did one film. No, it was a TV show around that time called The Last Dragon, where we got to do some creature stuff there and did flying dragons for that, and then. Then Buckbeak, the hippogriff in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Okay.
That's another flying thing there, and that was a really interesting mix of horse and bird eagle thing, and so trying to mesh those two things together.
No, that's fantastic. I guess the reason why I asked is I'm looking at like I said, your resume here, and how much of flying creatures you've got to work on is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, like I say, it's not something I'd seek out, which seems to happen.
But it's such as the nature is VFX, though, right? I mean, where you're dealing with all sorts of different creatures and fantasy type ones that obviously in fantasy, there are things that are going to fly. And yeah, I could see that very much so. Any particular creatures that you've really just enjoyed working on?
Well, I worked on Pacific Rim, ILM in Vancouver.
Okay.
I think that was really good fun.
There was a cool creature or cool flying one I think I saw on your reel that looked really cool.
Yeah, it's called Otachi, I think. So I mean, this is film, but it's...
Hang on, you cut out real quick. You said, sorry, you just cut out right when you...
Yeah, I'm getting a little warning that says my internet connection is unstable. I don't know, but yeah. Sorry, where did I... I'll have a drink of water as well.
There you go. You said it was Otachi?
Otachi, yeah. So I animated a creature called Otachi for that, which was, it attacked the robot and got its tail ripped off, and then was still able to grab this huge robot and then pick it up and fly into the sky with it. And it seems to leave the atmosphere as well. It doesn't just fly up a bit. It's like almost in space by the end of the sequence. So, so yeah, really fun to animate. Yeah, it's an interesting film. It's very, I guess it's very pushed, very exaggerated. I remember watching it and thinking, this acting's pretty cheesy, but I think maybe it has to be to kind of fit within the style of everything else that's going on. Everything's kind of a bit bigger, but yeah, that was, yeah. I mean, ILM was just a great place to work. I really enjoyed that, and they just want really good work, and so I thought when I went there that they'd be kind of like, you know, really on top of you, like you'd get loads of notes and everyone would be like, no, this has to be good, and kind of there'd be a lot of just kind of iterations, when actually it's one of the easier films I've done, in that they kind of just gave the artist quite a lot of freedom. And we got reviews with Guillermo del Toro as well. We'd actually, not in the same room, we'd have him on a screen, but that's very rare as well, that you're actually getting to communicate with the director and ask him questions and everything. And and I remember this time when I was wasn't on the Otachi, it was on this big crab monster thing, and I was had to walk down a street, and he could smash one building, but then he had to keep going, and there was another building in the way, and I was going, I can't get him past this building, you know. I was thinking it would be expensive if he hits that building, so I'm trying to get him to avoid that building. And so I was saying to the animation director, and he said, well, just have him smash that building as well then. And it's like, in other companies, it would be like, no, we can't afford the sim to do this. You have to kind of sort of, in a very sort of weird way, get him to not touch that building. But they were just kind of like, no, that would be cool, just smash that building. And there was this kind of just really nice atmosphere of kind of like, yeah, let's just make the shots as good as possible. So
freedom there, had to do that.
Yeah, so that was really good. I can't remember what the question was, but
that's very interesting. No, I like hearing about that, because each studio is so different. They've got their own, personalities. So it's always neat to hear kind of how each studio's operates. Was there any other studios that you kind of? Okay, let me back that up here a little bit. One of the things that I tend to like to ask questions on is, from each show, there's always typically something that you take away. I have a sports background, wrestling. And so there's always something that you kind of take away from, that tournament or match or whatever, that you can kind of take now to the next one, that you kind of either need to work on, or that you've gleaned and you're taking that as you move forward. And so I kind of analogize that here for shows. Was there any particular studios, like you mentioned there, or any shows that you just really gleaned from as you kind of moved on to throughout your career?
I think working on Cloudy 2 was a really cool experience for learning. That was just, I came off Pacific Rim, which was doing everything really big and slow, and I went on to Cloudy 2, which is suddenly this cartoony, zippy animation. And getting up to speed on that was pretty tough. I remember the first shot I got was like this cheeseburger, a cheese spider, I guess it is.
Oh, yeah.
It had to kind of run away into the forest after being kind of scared off by a helicopter, and so that was my first shot, and I did it, and I showed it to my the supervisor, and he's like, he's moving really slow. It looks like it's a sad cheeseburger kind of walking up. It's like, I'm still in Pacific Rim weight, where things have to kind of move slowly and be heavy. where it's like, all right, so just like scale it up by about 3 times, and it goes, just zooms off. But yeah, and a kind of I guess a leadership thing on that I really liked was the animation director Pete Nash.
Okay, yeah.
So how it would work was, in the morning you'd come in, and then you would typically show your shots to the leads and the animation director Pete Nash in the morning. Then there'd be a review again in the afternoon with the directors. And so, yeah, what usually happens is if the animation director is not happy with something, he won't then show it to the director. But what Pete would do he would give you notes in the morning, and usually there'd be, there'd be really good notes, and you'd be like, oh yeah, that's a brilliant idea. But if you were kind of stuck on your own idea, or you wanted to present your own idea, he'd let you do that. So they'd show that shot in the afternoon, whether you'd done his notes or not, and he'd kind of introduce it, go, okay, this is the shot, I feel maybe we should do this. So that was quite rare, and I thought that showed a real confidence in leadership, where he was like, okay, this is what I would do to the shot to make it better, but I'm not the all-seeing kind of person, that I'm happy to just, if you really want to pitch this to the directors, then you go for it. And that was quite refreshing, and I think that added to the animation, and that everyone felt like they weren't being told what to do. They could do their own thing, and it would kind of, I mean, sometimes most of the time the directors would say, yeah, I think you're right, Pete, we should do that. But you got the option, I guess,
right,
to fight for your idea if you felt that it was different.
You got to go to the plate at least, huh?
Yeah.
Take a nice swing.
A swing and a miss. Mostly, right?
Hey, I'd rather go out swinging and missing than not be able to swing at all. So that's a cool opportunity. And I think as an artist too, that's one of the biggest things where you feel like you're not just a cog in the system, but you're as an artist attributing to it. So I can see where that would be a neat memory then, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the balance, I guess, as someone who, as you're trying to manage a lead artist, that you want to have that, keeping an eye on things, and you're making sure there's quality, but then you got to give the artist some sort of autonomy so they feel like they own their work.
Right.
And because I have been on a few visual effects shows where you're just getting notes and notes and notes and notes and notes, and the life's been driven out of you, but also the shot as well. That at the end, it's trying to appeal to all these different notes, and it's not really saying anything anymore, So yeah, that's the balance, I guess, as a commercial artist, that you want to have the artist's creativity in the shot, but also satisfy the other aspects of quality and also storytelling as well.
Right. That's kind of funny that you mentioned Cloud with a Chance of Meatballs, particularly after Pacific Rim, because I was thinking, yeah, it's a very different movie, but it makes sense too with some of the creatures that were in there, the food creatures, why that would be utilize a lot of your already skill sets in regards to creature animation. So that's just kind of funny when you mentioned that was one of your first shots.
That was the first shot, and I think they did know that I was, hadn't done a lot of that sort of stuff before. So I did a car coming over a waterfall and things that were kind of, heavy and creatures. But
yeah, that's funny.
But I did come in really, really struggling at the start. And it's one of those things as well where you think, I've been animating for I don't know how many years then, and at that point probably 10 years. I'm a 10-year animator. I'm getting these kind of quite simple shots, but then you're like, but I'm not as good as these other people around me. I need to kind of up my game here and kind of learn from them and work really hard. So I started off feeling a bit out of my depth, but I was quite happy, although I didn't do some of the A shots in the film, but I did work my way up to getting some pretty nice Chester V shots, and he was one of the more kind of I don't know if surreal's the right word in the way he was animated, but kind of I was quite chuffed that they would start giving me more of his shot, because I thought I've managed to achieved something here, I guess. I've gone from coming in as a kind of a creature animator to being able to animate this really cartoony character that seems to not, obey the laws of physics or anatomy at all. So,
yeah, very, very different than creature work. VFX.
Yeah.
What have you enjoyed in your career working in VFX? What's been one of the most rewarding parts about it?
Yeah, I do like just the learning, I guess. I mean, that's a naff answer, but just kind of each little step you're figuring things out, and like the bird flight thing, I guess. You animate one bird, and there's mistakes that you make that everyone makes the first time, and then you do it again, you get a bit better, and you do it again, and you get a bit better, and you start looking at different reference, and you find some cool kind of link, or you look at other people's work, and I think it's just animation's that thing, I guess, that you never really
arrive.
You never get to the point where you're I can do anything now.
You get some flying horse creature then in
yeah, it's always like, oh no, how do I animate this is going to be hard. So I guess that, I don't know, I don't really have a very coherent answer, but I just enjoy everything you get a chance to learn something, and if you're doing something again, then you've got knowledge that you can apply to it and go, okay, well, maybe I can do this even better than this time. So I think with animation, you can bring kind of whatever you've got into it, I guess. I remember one of my friends was very musical, and he was talking about how when he did his animation, he would set out his keys and he could see them as beats, and his timing was so strong because he had this kind of musical ability, and he could put that into his animation. And I think other people have, a strong interest in acting, or a strong interest in, some people do martial arts in their spare time. And it's kind of whatever you do, you can kind of put this into the work. Mm-hmm. And I guess if I have anything, then I have this interest in anatomy and nature generally, and that's something that I can put into my work and make sure that I'm doing something that maybe someone else isn't doing.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, like I said, I was listening to some of our past podcasts, and one of the ones that struck me was Eamon Butler. He's got a background from early Disney CG, but then moved over to Cinesite, where he's forget his role there. He's one of the animation directors or whatever. But they're doing a lot of at the time of this podcast, it was just prior to their feature division, but they're doing obviously a lot of VFX. And one of the things he said he enjoyed about VFX was the quicker turnarounds, where you get to try a lot more. And that's kind of sounds like what you were talking about, this idea of being able to try a lot of different types of characters, and where VFX is a quicker turnaround, you get to do that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. You never know what you're going to get. It's like, 1 week you'll be animating a dragon, next week you'll be doing something, there's just, I guess there's mocap which is used quite a lot in visual effects, if something's humanoid. So the stuff you're typically getting is, well, we can't do this any other way but animation. So you have to kind of figure that out, I guess.
That's cool. Yeah. Very cool. One of the creatures that stood out to me as I was watching your reel, and I apologize, I've not seen the movie, John Carter. There was this white creature that kind of comes out of looks like a cave.
Yeah. They're called white apes.
White apes. That was phenomenal animation. Beautiful. The sense of energy and weight in that was just really, really cool. What was it that you did to prepare for that shot? As far as you shoot reference, was that something you guys had mocap and had to finish animating? What was it?
It's been a while ago. I can't remember how I prepared for that. I think, John Carter, there's quite a lot of humanoid alien characters, and they were quite, you could use yourself for reference for that. I think I just made it up. And then I guess I did look at some gorillas. I mean, we had Alvise Avati,
Okay.
On that show. He was on that sequence as well. And I mean, he's just a phenomenal talent, one of the best creature animators in the world. And so a lot of it was just looking at his stuff, I guess.
Okay.
Seeing what he was doing and what
he's the one that worked with Eamon Butler on that short Beans with Cinesight with that creature there. So he mentioned his name in that a lot. So that's interesting to bring him up. Okay.
Yeah. No, he's anyone in visual effects. He's one of the main guys I think that's what he's got figured out, is that kind of gorilla-y creature. He worked on King Kong, then those apes and John Carter, and that Beans thing again. I mean, he seems to be able to do anything, but that's particularly strong. Is that these kind of gorilla-esque creatures that he seems to have got down pat.
Well, yours look very sharp too. So,
oh well.
Like I said, just what I really liked about it was the sporadicness in it, but still felt very grounded. If that makes any sense.
I do remember using the arc tool a lot. I think that's something that I really got into at that time, was really trying to move things quickly, but then you have to, like, to make it feel weighty, you have to make sure everything's moving, with good spacing in arcs as well. And I think that I was doing that shot and it was kind of looking a bit funky, and then I kind of really got in there, just everything I checked the arc for, checked the chest, the hips, the hands, the elbows, and I think that helped that shot quite a lot.
Very cool.
But yeah, I think it had quite a lot to do in that shot. It's quite a short shot, and it was like, right, he's running out the gate, he has to hit the gate. He's blind. You have to keep reminding the audience that they're blind, these things. So he hits the gate because he can't see it. Then he gets angry at the gate and he pushes it out the way. Then he kind of runs out. And so the shot's not that long. I'd be surprised if it's even 100 frames. So you're trying to get a lot in there, I guess. And that's kind of, so that built in some frenetic energy just with the amount of sort of business I had to get through.
What is your approach in animation as far as your workflow?
It varies from project to project, I guess. And I think I started out doing CG in kind of a layered approach.
Okay.
And then I think The Tale of Despereaux was the first time that someone said, no, we have to do like a stepped thing. So your first block has to be these stepped keys. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really hard to do that, first of all. But then I quite liked that after a while, just thinking about poses and then worrying almost about the timing later.
Right.
And not having that distracting, spliny movement in your first block as well. So I think generally I do things stepped. Sometimes I'll start with the core of like animating the ups and downs. I guess that's the bouncing ball thing, that if I'll sometimes just start doing ups and downs on like the hips and chest and get that working. So I can sometimes build it from there. But if it's a character thing or a complex piece of action, I'll try and do stepped keys and do poses. And that's generally the way I teach animation, is to try and, because if you're doing like the spline straight ahead, you're doing sort of posing and sort of timing both at the same time. And that gets quite complicated. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just visually, you're looking at it and you're trying to judge it on, is the timing working and is the pose good? Whereas if you do step keys, then you're separating those two things a little bit. Yeah, you just think, are these poses good or strong, or what? Do they feel
conveying this message? And
and are they? Yeah, when you go between them, does it feel like a good transition? Change in whatever it is, face or body posture, whatever. So yeah, this is another, I'm not really answering the question, but I like step forward, that where you can do poses first and then worry about the timing later slightly.
Gotcha. Does that also seem to kind of come from your 2D background as well, looking at them in poses?
Yeah. Again, it was weird that when I started doing 3D, that wasn't really a thing. But yeah, I think that's probably why when I got to do it in Tale of Despereaux, I thought, all right, it's something clicks here, that you can work that way a bit more.
That was another fun one I liked a lot too, the Tale of Despereaux.
You seem to like the slightly obscure animated features.
I did. It was one of those ones, again, when you're not, don't have a whole lot of expectation, I guess. You just don't know. And it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. That took, I can sit back and just kind of enjoy the ride a little bit. And so sometimes with these ones here, when they're a little bit obscure, you don't know what to expect. You have no preconceived notions. You're kind of just able to enjoy it. So that was one I did actually. I remember enjoying one. Oh, okay, that was interesting. That was fun.
That's interesting. So, yeah, it was really cool. I mean, that was like London at that time was all just visual effects.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people were really itching to do some animated feature. And so this Tale of Despereaux was a real kind of, this is Framestore they tried to, I think, create their own animation department, but unfortunately that didn't seem to happen. But yeah, at the time the film was really sought after, and the team they had was just amazing. Mm. You know, I was I'm not going to remember his name now. Tim Watts, I think. He was one of the leads, and he was someone who come from 2D. He was basically Richard Williams' prodigy.
Okay.
And then my lead was, for a time, Michael Schlingmann, who was another person who'd come from Richard Williams' studio. And so you had these people, and Michael Schlingmann would print out frames from your animation and then sort of draw over to say the drawing should be more like this, and it was just amazing animators. Again, I got onto it kind of late, kind of like the crunch time.
Uh-huh.
So I think I worked on it for 6 months. So
that's still a good chunk of time there.
Still a good chunk of time. I would say that. Yeah, I guess I didn't feel like I completely mastered. Who has? But I was kind of I look back at my Despereaux work and I'm not particularly impressed by it, but it was a great experience, and the team they had there was amazing.
Now, maybe this is I don't know, just throw it out there. In your opinion, why has VFX been the dominating style of anime, or not style, but the animation portion of our industry there in Europe versus feature?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's possibly the way it's come about, I guess, where animation studios in London were typically kind of service providers, I suppose.
Okay.
I mean, this is me kind of guessing here.
Right.
But I think most of the studios started out as kind of doing animation as kind of like, okay, well, you've got a commercial, so we'll do your animation commercial. That's what Richard Williams' studio was mostly doing, and Framestore and stuff like that. It would kind of be like little bits of work here and there. And so as they got into visual effects, I mean, they were small pieces of films generally in the start. And so it was, I guess it comes out of that, where it's service work, whereas over in LA and America, that's where the movies were made, that's where they were being written, and that's where that was happening. And it was kind of, I would guess that.
No, just wondering, from someone who's been in the trenches there, I guess, so to speak, if you had any unique insight. But no, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier, bringing in certain things as far as, someone maybe having a karate background, things of that nature, their spare time. What do you do in your spare time that either translates back into animation or kind of gives you a release, so to speak, from animation? What is that, something you do?
Hobbies wise, I don't have a lot at the moment. Me and my wife have got a small child, and so that's basically what I do with my small time. But my role at the university, I have a lecturer part and a research part.
Okay.
So obviously I'm teaching, but then I also get to sort of investigate whatever I kind of feel like I want to investigate. So I've been using that to kind of look at a few things, but one of them is sort of dinosaurs, and really try and get into the paleontological information to see what we actually know about how dinosaurs moved, and yeah, so that's one thing that I
Interesting.
guess is feeding in, and yeah.
Hang on, you cut out for a second. You said feeding in.
Hang on. Yeah, I don't think I said it very coherently. Yeah, I guess that. So this paleontological information will hopefully kind of feed into the workshop as well. How I'm planning it at the moment is that we'll start out in birds, and then we'll look at, I think, the iAnimate T-Rex. And so we're looking at a kind of a descendant of birds and kind of seeing, okay, so what do we know from birds, and maybe what do we know from scientific discoveries? And then, okay, so then what do we have to make up, or what do we have to use animation techniques to fill in the gaps? And so that's kind of like a stepping stone from birds to dinosaurs. And then at the end, we'll get into fantasy creatures like dragons and go, okay, we can still pull things from both those things, but now we have to invent more, or you rely on other techniques to kind of make it look convincing.
Very cool. Yeah, I remember we did a podcast with David Hubert. I forgot who else was in that podcast with him off the top of my head. But it was when he was leading the creature stuff off of Crudes there at DreamWorks. And obviously you have a lot of these creatures that have never existed before because they're just made up. But again, that same idea where you're going, okay, it kind of moves like this. So how can we be creative and fill in the gaps? And that seems kind of like what you're talking about there, which is a lot of fun. That's, as artists, our goal, and I think large in part what drives us is that creativity. So that seems like a lot of fun to be able to kind of start going, how can I get creative and fill in some of the gaps here?
I think what you want to avoid as an animator doing a creature is something that's generic, I guess. You don't want something that just feels like it's vanilla or kind of or even copying something else. You're always going, okay, what references can I pull in to make this more interesting or make it different to what's happened before? And so, and what of yourself, obviously, can you put in as well? So that's I think that sounds what David was doing on Crudes, where you pull in these unusual references into this creature to kind of so it's specific, but it's different to what's actually out there.
Right. Now, okay, kind of just this is why I only have a certain amount of notes, because my brain starts kind of taking what you've said and starts kind of, going off these rabbit trails here. So that said, what would that be something that it would also pertain to maybe demo reels, as far as people looking getting into VFX and things of that nature, where their demo reel would have strong creature work, but maybe done in a way that's not so vanilla? Or would you want something that's more vanilla so it shows I can competently do it? I guess. I don't know.
It's an interesting question, I guess. Depends what you're animating. Like, I guess if you're doing something like a real creature, like a tiger or whatever, dog, then you want that to look as convincing as possible.
Okay.
I guess where you get to express yourself is in the performance of that.
Right.
Have that doing something interesting or showing some behavior that maybe you've not seen before. Trying to do something that's even more convincing than maybe what you've seen before. But yeah, certainly with when you're doing your creatures, that's a really good opportunity to show people something different, where they go, wow, I've never seen something move like that before. That's really interesting references he's used, and he's tried to really be creative with that. So
that makes sense. That's very cool. Has there been any favorite movie you've worked on that kind of just stands out still to you?
Best movie I've worked on. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm quite harsh on the movies I work on generally, so I don't think I've worked on any kind of truly great movies.
maybe even the experience, maybe the crew that you worked on, or maybe, as you mentioned, they're working with Pete Nash. It was his leadership. Was there any movie that maybe during that time that it was a great experience?
Yeah, well, actually, there's one. We worked on Happy Feet back in 2000, and David Hubert worked on Happy Feet as well. I met him there, and I mean, that was an interesting experience in that we didn't quite know. I had this kind of interview with them. I was in the UK, there in Australia, so I had this kind of very awkward interview where there's a time delay, and I'm on the phone, and they're sitting around on a table, and there's lots of awkward pauses and things like that. And you're just trying to get through it as quickly as possible, and then it's like, okay, I've got the job, and I'm doing this film, Happy Feet. I didn't really know what it was to expect. There's people, it's dancing penguins, but and they're saying, the dancing's going to be mocap, but the rest of it's just going to be keyframe. And then sort of saying, oh no, they're getting rid of the mocap, it's all going to be keyframe. Or some people saying it's all, basically I didn't know. And we got there and it was all mocap, basically. There's a few keyframe sequences, but for the majority of it, you're just animating the face over this kind of approved mocap, and you're not allowed to touch the mocap. So it was a good experience to learn some facial animation, which I'd done too much of.
Okay.
But it was just I really liked that experience. Living in Australia was just amazing. It's just a great place. We used to go surfing in the morning before work.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, just lovely weather and people, and there's just such a fun team working on that. And so, yeah, made lots of really good friends on that. And that was I guess that was, and well, the film technically won an Oscar, so that is a good film as well.
There you go. Yeah. And like you said, like I mentioned earlier, obviously Scotland's got some beautiful landscape, but there's a reason why it's always green. It's because you get a lot of rain. So to be able to go be in Australia for a little bit where you can go surfing and stuff, I'm sure that was a very cool experience.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, just not having to put on coats all the time. You just kind of you'd wear a t-shirt and a pair of shorts and flip-flops. And
There you go. That's my attire there. Board shorts and sandals. There you go.
Yeah. But the people are really friendly as well. They're like, I mean, it's a kind of a cliche. They say the Australians are laid back, but they really are. It's really just nice culture there as well. So
very cool. Has there been any other places that you've enjoyed? It looks like you got to travel around quite a bit.
I went to New Zealand for Weta, the last Hobbit film. That's an amazing place as well. Also Vancouver for Sony and ILM, and and again, another great place there where you can go drive 40 minutes and go snowboarding, so you can go snowboarding in the evening. You're not working too late because it's quite tough schedules over there, but that was another beautiful place. Just you're out in nature and
very cool. Now, have you worked in the States yet?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so this is one place we'll have to get you over to sometime, huh?
Yeah, visas are a bit tricky, so and getting more tricky perhaps as well.
Hopefully that'll all kind of even out and settle down, huh? What are you looking forward to teaching this coming term? Is there anything that kind of drives you? I know you mentioned, obviously, you're a lecturer there at Dundee University, so teaching's already in your forte. But anything particular where, here we have a audience that's worldwide, jumping on live, that interaction there, is there anything there that's exciting?
Teaching at the university or on the
iAnimate.
On Animate. I'm going to do something on weight, which I'm quite looking forward to teaching. I've got, I guess this came out of Guardians as well, where we had to do that thing where you're taking something that's small and trying to scale it up and make it feel bigger. And so I was like, well, how do you do that? And I kind of figured, well, you have to adjust gravity. If something is small, then you have to make it feel big by the time it takes to kind of fall essentially. And so I'd kind of started filming me dropping balls and counting the frames, going, okay, well, if something's falling for this many frames, it's going to fall this distance, and so I can kind of work it out. And a friend of mine, Dan Fotheringham, took this even further, and he's got this kind of technique where he uses gravity to kind of get the weight right in his creatures. And so I'm going to do a bit of that, I think, which I'm excited to show. I think it's one of those things where it's really easy to have the character moving too much, and what you're doing then is you're making it feel light. So you've got this kind of technique where you can go, and that weight is correct, sort of. But there's a bit of artistic cheating, but generally it gives you a really nice foundation, getting the weight right on your creature, and that's a really good thing to teach, I think.
Very cool. And that's one of the things I really just appreciate with our instructors, is that you guys are the ones who have been in the industry, currently keeping up to date, and you're always, from workshop to workshop, it becomes different. I mean, the things that you teach this coming term versus when you teach again, maybe slightly different, because there's always new things that you're learning here. So some of the things I just really appreciate having guys like you who've got the background, who are currently staying up to date, teaching. You're always constantly bringing the latest, greatest. So that's always a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, I think that's what makes it interesting, I guess, to keep learning. I did this. I've got this page online where I did this stuff on bird flight, but I've got all this extra stuff now that I'll teach on top of that. And
very cool.
I was at a conference earlier this year with Stuart Samida, who's the kind of paleontologist who goes around teaching anatomy. And he sent me this whole folder full of bird flight information. So I'm still going through and unpacking all that, but I've got all this amazing new information to kind of digest and try and add in as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. Any final thoughts, tips, tricks for those that are listening? Kind of broad there.
What can I say? One thing that I've learned, kind of looking back, I've been doing it a while now, so I guess I think a lot of people that are starting out are in a rush. They want to get to Pixar, get to ILM, whatever it is. They want to get there as soon as possible. And I think my advice would be, don't be in a rush. I think whatever project you do, even if it's not the best film, and I've worked on plenty of those, just look at it and go, well, what can I learn from this experience? What can I take from this and become a better artist or animator for that? And, you'll get there. You keep working away and improving, you'll get to where you want. And if you get there too soon, who knows? You might get bored of it if you're, I don't know if people are working at Pixar are getting bored, but there's that potential, I guess, that you go, okay, well, I've achieved this, so now what? Where enjoy the journey, enjoy all the things along the way and getting a bit better. And I think there are those kind of I don't know what you're going to call them, savants or kind of little geniuses that seem to come straight out of school and then go straight to DreamWorks or Pixar or something. But most people aren't like that. Most people, it's just practice and practice and practice and trying to absorb information and just gradually getting better over time. And so that's, don't get disheartened if you feel like you're not good enough, and don't worry about trying to get to Pixar straight after college or after a job. These things take time, and you have a long career in animation. You can keep going for a long time. It's not like professional football or something where you've only got 10 years.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant, man. That's brilliant. I think particularly in our cultures where everything's instant this, instant that, it can become frustrating when we think we haven't arrived and we think we ought to, and you miss out on the journey. So that's great advice. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. I've just made it up. It's probably nonsense.
Well, Brendan, I really appreciate your time and looking forward to you teaching here at iAnimate and what you're going to teach our students, getting those ones out there to the industry and advancing their careers as well. So thank you so much for your time, and look forward to seeing you here at our next term.
Not at all. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.